use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Donald Trump's win in 2016 came just weeks after that video went public for the very first time and sent a strong signal across the country. Sexual assault was not disqualifying. It was no longer a political red line. It was something that, politically speaking, could be minimized, even joked about by the accused's own spouse as locker room talk. Now, 8 years later, the same signal is being amplified, projected out into this country, this time through Trump himself, now an adjudicated sexual abuser, and his cabinet picks. Donald Trump's picks to head the Department of Defense, HHS, and his first pick for Attorney General all have sexual assault allegations levied against them. And his choice to run the Education Department has been sued for enabling sexual assault. Overall, these choices Donald Trump has made and his decision to pick them and then stand by them as the allegations become public have already had a profound effect. Michigan's Attorney General Dana Nessel writes in a new op-ed in the Detroit Free Press that Trump's picks show disdain for victims of sexual assault. She writes this, quote, "These nominations reduce the often devastating trauma that affects victims throughout the rest of their lives to an unfortunate public relations hurdle to be overcome by powerful people, being lifted further up our nation's power structures." When the White House asked the people, the press, and the United States Congress to overlook or ignore these accusations as mistakes or minor details, balanced against the nominees' desirable ideologies or resumes, they beg you to ignore the lifelong suffering of their victims and so many others out there who already feel that justice is outside their reach. Specifically, when it comes to Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's choice to lead the Pentagon, our friend Amy McGrath asked Congress to have the courage to vote against his confirmation. She writes in Newsweek this, quote, "Hegseth's public persona as a champion of traditional values contrasts with his actions. Multiple public affairs and allegations of sexual assault suggest serious character flaws. As our military combats sexual assault as an ongoing problem, what does it say if we elevate this man to oversee this issue? He wears a white supremacist tattoo on his body. An officer or enlisted service member would not be promoted with such a background. How can this man earn their respect? His deeply controversial past, rife with allegations of personal misconduct and extremist political views, should disqualify him outright." The message being sent by Trump and his cabinet picks is where we start the hour with the authors of those op-eds, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel and retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel and founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, Amy McGrath is here. Also joining us, my colleague, MSNBC senior contributing editor, Michelle Norris. Madam Attorney General, I start with you. Let me read a little bit more of your piece. From 2017 to 2020, Trump and his cabinet issued rules that made it more difficult to hold sexual assailants to justice on campuses, stopped rulemaking that would have addressed sexual assault against members of healthcare professions, opposed legislation that would have provided increased rights to sexual assault victims in the military, and threatened to withhold sexual assault prevention funding from several cities over disagreement with those cities' policies. Say a little bit more about what these picks say.
I mean, it's pretty clear. It's that we don't care about the crime of sexual assault, and we don't care about the survivors who have to live with it. It's really concerning. And I think what we know about the policies moving forward based on the first version of the Trump administration is that they're going to do everything in their power to defund the Crime Victims Act, the Violence Against Women Act, and it's really going to have a substantial impact in our ability to investigate and prosecute sexual abuse crimes, sexual assault crimes, as well as really necessary things like, counseling for survivors, and a number of other ways in which we work hard to ensure not just that people are held accountable for these crimes, but that we're helping the victims and survivors of them.
When you look, Madam Attorney General, at the fact that 53% of white women voted for him, what does that say about what was covered as some progress or some safer climate for women to adjudicate sexual assault and the power dynamic in the Me Too era. What does that say?
I wish that I could explain that in some way, shape, or form. All I know is this. In the over 30 years that I've been handling sexual assault cases, either as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, do you know how many survivors of sexual abuse have ever said to me, hey, that time that I was raped, it was really no big deal. It didn't have much of an impact on my life. Can you guess?
None.
Zero is the answer to that. Zero. It impacts everyone. And I think people should also know that it has a devastating impact economically. And in fact, the CDC did a study on this. And on average, per act of sexual assault, it has about $125,000 impact on the economy when you look at all the consequences, the ripple effect of sexual assault. So if you were a person, if you're one of these white women who said, well, I was mostly concerned about economic issues, rape also creates economic issues. People should know that.
It's sort of a sick thing to even have to defend, right? That there's also an economic issue. I mean, I feel like we're in this Orwellian moment where what's up is down, what's down is up, what's real is the lies that they've told are now becoming the people running our government. What do you think the potential political fallout is from Donald Trump maybe overreading a mandate that has nothing to do with people being okay with the things he's been found liable to have done, has nothing to do with people wanting to take a pass on allegations of sex trafficking of a minor, a settlement? I mean, Bill O'Reilly was fired from Fox News for the kinds of settlements that the Trump transition team just rolls out as, yeah, there was a settlement with the woman who has accused him of assault. I mean, what do you think it says about the moment in our politics?
All I know is that when I first ran for Attorney General in 2018, I was assailed as somebody who was unfit for this office because as an attorney, as a public defender, I had represented people who were charged with sexual assault. It's the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. They had the right to have an attorney represent them. But I had prosecutors and sheriffs around the state say that that was disqualifying for me to be Attorney General. Now, the Republicans have turned that on its head and to say, not only is it not disqualifying to have represented somebody in that capacity, you yourself can be a person who has committed the crime of sexual assault, and it's A-OK with us. We don't have any problem with it at all. And I think it really speaks to a deep concern in terms of what our country's values are. But I can tell you this, for the people of my state, for the people of the United States, and for women especially, who are most often targeted for sexual assault, I think it's going to be, a shock to the system when they see what the ripple effects are of having people like these individuals be in these positions of authority, and how this incredibly damaging crime is treated all the way from in our military to with our healthcare professionals to our college campuses. It's going to be devastating to people all around the country, but unfortunately, I think people are going to find that out the hard way.
Amy, let me show you what Republican Senator Kevin Cramer says about the allegations against Mr. Hegseth.
Did the sexual assault report, its allegation, does that give you any pause with Pete Hegseth?
Well, it's a pretty big problem, given that we have we have a sexual assault problem in our military that a number of us, and certainly the champions being Kirsten Gillibrand and Joni Ernst, but I've been on board with them and in support of the legislation to deal with it since the chain of command was not. And so, yeah, it becomes a problem. Again, this is why you have background checks. This is why you have hearings. This is why you have go through the scrutiny. I'm not going to prejudge them, but yeah, it's a pretty concerning accusation.
Amy.
Well, it's a very concerning accusation. We clearly still have a problem with sexual assault in the military. But, you know, I think with regards to Pete Hegseth, his moral failings are actually overshadow the simple fact that he is the most unqualified pick for Secretary of Defense, really ever. I mean, he has almost no government experience or experience in working within a bureaucracy. He has no experience in strategic planning from a defense perspective. He has very little management experience. I mean, he's barely led a very small group of veterans, less than 50 people before. So he is super unqualified for this position to be in charge of the largest federal agency our government has. He is now nominated to oversee $800 billion and 3 million people. He's just simply unqualified for the job as well.
Amy, let me show you what Senator Tammy Duckworth has said about whether or not the confirmation process will include hearing from the victim.
Is the committee going to speak with the victim to ask if this was a misunderstanding?
Well, that will be the decision of the Republican chairman of the committee next year. I hope that we will, but I suspect that they, again, will roll over for Mr. Trump. Frankly, I will raise those questions. Remember that we've just fought over a decade of fights and overhauled the military and its treatment of military sexual trauma. It's frankly an insult and really troubling that Mr. Trump would nominate someone who has admitted that he's paid off a victim who has claimed rape allegations against him. This is not the kind of person you want to lead the Department of Defense.
Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic that the confirmation process will be a genuine vetting of his character and his past?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm genuinely an optimistic person to begin with. So, yes. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Trump wins in this fight and gets this person as Secretary of Defense. But it really is a slap in the face to everyone who works in the DOD and those people who serve our country, because the services, remember, we are a values-based military. That's what makes us special. If you look at our mission statements, you look at the core values of all the services, there are terms like integrity and honor and character. And what does it say to our members of the military that these are the ideals that we hold them to, and yet you're going to uplift a man like Pete Hegseth with such terrible moral character flaws to lead them? I think that, unfortunately, this is part of Trumpism right now. And the Republicans in Congress need to stand up in the Senate and protect our military.
Michelle, I've been interested in men, right, and what's going on with men and how Joe Rogan became more powerful than the man Donald Trump tapped to be his running mate, right? There were very few news cycles about anything J.D. Vance did to advance his candidate. There were more news cycles, even where Donald Trump was involved, about how he created problems. But Joe Rogan was, I think, viewed as a pure asset on the right and inside the MAGA movement. And it's a really important conversation. It's one we have to have as a country. But it has overshadowed the conversation about women. And this was an election. This was the first presidential election in a post-Dobbs America. And I've been asked questions just as a cable host. Do you think that this story about the dead women, had not enough women died? Two in Georgia, as reported by ProPublica, and on Election Day, only one in Texas. Since then, ProPublica has reported on a second woman who has died. And since the election, some of the maternal mortality statistical processes have been cut out. So we may not even know moving forward about the life or death implications of women being pregnant and having sex in post-Dobbs America. But you take the issue of sexual assault, and a woman who is a survivor of sexual assault or rape, the Attorney General may know the answer to this, but a very small percentage of those women actually seeks to adjudicate their cases criminally or civilly. So what you have in these picks are this small sliver of accused men for whom their victims have either reported them or sought to adjudicate the abuse. And you have 53% of white women voting for the man who has tapped these men to run his government. But you have in Trump's running mate someone who believes, quote, staying in marriages, even the violent ones, is better than divorce. You have in Gates someone who is accused of sex trafficking a 17-year-old. There is no legal sex work for a minor, so whatever the circumstances, it is not a legal interaction. You have in Hegseth this 22-page police report, which is at a minimum harrowing, and at a maximum, there's a settlement for Fox News for Mr. Hegseth's conduct with this accuser. In Donald Trump, let me play what Donald Trump describes about what you can do when you're famous.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the.
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
And now you said before, a couple of minutes ago, that this was just locker room talk.
It's locker room talk.
And so does that mean that you didn't really mean it?
No, it's locker room talk. I don't know. It's just the way people talk.
Unapologetic, again, at a minimum. And then you take Linda McMahon, who in some ways is most interesting, right? She's accused by former employees of hers and her husband's, Vince McMahon, of basically being aware of, again, at a minimum, most conservative description of those allegations, sexual abuse of then teenagers. It is a portrait so cruelly cartoonish. It defies belief that in 2024, the United States of America chose this. How front and center do you think all of this was on Election Day?
You know, Nicole, I don't know, because there's so much of this that doesn't make sense, that women would support a president knowing that that was in his background. What they did not know is what was coming with these cabinet picks who now, so many of them have sexual assault allegations as part of their portfolios. You'd like to think that most people would protest if someone had that kind of background, those kind of charges against them, and they were running for principal of the school, for the head of the organization that you worked for anything that would be close in your orbit. But there's an assumption in this case that these candidates are going to be able to move forward, plow forward, without explaining in any way what they did, and that they will just ignore these kind of allegations that also include, in Pete Hegseth's case, drinking to excess in public, paying off someone so they would keep silent because he was worried about losing his job with Fox News, but appears to be less worried about having his confirmation stopped because of these same kind of allegations. We should be really clear here, though, about the hypocrisy that's evident in these nominations. Let's not pretend that if a Democratic president, either Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton reaching back, had presented a roster of nominees who had these kind of charges against them, we know that the Republicans on the other side of the aisle would be crying foul, would be asking for investigations, would be calling people in front of committees to demand an explanation and probably just stop the nomination altogether. So, there's just rank hypocrisy in this as well. And in Hegseth's case, you have someone who was, you mentioned the tattoos that he's had. He's explained that. He took some time to explain what that means. I guess we should take him at his word that this is a Christian symbol in that case. Is he willing to take the same amount of time to explain what he says is a he said, she said situation regarding those allegations in Monterey? I don't think that he's going to be willing to do that. The expectation is that nomination will just sail forward. And it does send a very terrible message to the women who are courageous enough to step forward when they have experienced sexual trauma. It also sends a very damaging message to the people who adjudicate these cases, who think, is it worth it to bring charges, to go through the process of trying to get justice in some of these cases. It sends a confusing message to HR individuals. And let's not forget that it sends a very confusing message to people who are coming of age in this moment and looking at the America that they're going to be living in.
Okay, it's a privilege to have all of you. I know we only asked you to stay for the first block. May I sneak in a break and pull all of you through? Because I think that to land on the fact of it and not the response to it is also a mistake, and one that they count on, right? That it feels preordained. We've all used the words, they're going to plow through, they're going to barrel by, he's going to stand by his men. It feels like viewing all of this as inevitable would be our mistake. So I'm gonna call an audible here and ask all of you to stick around through a commercial break. Donald Trump, we're also going to tell you about his hollow statements and hypocrisy on the subject of law enforcement and his support for the men and women of law enforcement. His team is shunning the nation's top law enforcement agency by refusing to let the FBI vet any of these people or any members of his transition. It is also a risk to national security, and we'll talk about that. We're back with Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, Amy McGrath, and Michelle Norris. Madam Attorney General, what does standing up for the victims and standing up for the truth look like?
Well, it means doing what we're doing right now, right? Communicating to the general public, firstly, that if you make a report to our department, we are going to take that complaint incredibly seriously. And we're going to start out from a position of believing what you're telling us and then investigate it from that perspective. And I think this is the biggest problem that we're facing here, right? It's the issue, and you brought up how many people report or don't report. It's about a third of sexual assault victims that even step forward and make a report to law enforcement or anybody else to begin with. I think we're going to see, unfortunately, that number might start to decrease as a result of what we're discussing today. But I think the message we need to send is that this is not okay. We are not all right with the offense of sexual assault. We're going to treat it incredibly seriously. We are going to use all of our efforts to investigate and to prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of the law. And that people like your panelists today are not just going to accept the fact that people who have these types of, either convictions or even credible complaints in their background, that they would ever be qualified to lead these enormous and incredibly important agencies and departments throughout the nation. And so we have to continue to push back and to say this is not okay. And just because somebody who has a record of having been involved in sexual assault to become president of the United States, it doesn't matter who sits in the Oval Office. The rest of us are still going to hold these people to account and take these crimes and the stories of survivors very seriously.
Amy, it seems like it might be a little harder to do that in the military, where the justice system is more insular and almost walled off by design from public scrutiny. But what can people do to support the women in the military?
Well, stay engaged. Stay engaged and have our backs. You know, those people who, especially women in the military, military members in general, were not able to speak up against some of Donald Trump's policies that are going to be coming down the pike. So I feel like those people who are outside the military, who see the real impact on women in the military, see the real impact on readiness, see the impact on the military as an institution, as an ethical institution, what I talked about earlier. Those of us that understand this from the outside need to speak up, need to have the backs of women in the military and the military in general. I think that's really important in the next 4 years. We all sort of sometimes want to throw up our hands and say, oh, well, it's, he's in office and there's nothing we can do. But there is a lot that we can do, and we need to do it for our military, for our kids, and really for the world in general.
All right. Well, on that, to be continued. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, thank you for making time for us. Amy McGrath, thank you as always for making time for us and starting us off. Michelle sticks around with us. When we come back, why the Trump transition team doesn't want the FBI vetting any of these picks. We'll have that conversation next.
We want a crime-free America. We're going to stop violent crime in the United States. And it's people like this that can do the job better than anybody. There's nobody like them, so they can do it. They have to be given back their rights and their dignity. They have to be allowed to do their job. I will deliver law, order, safety, and peace.
That was Donald Trump on the campaign trail promising law enforcement that if he is president, he would allow them to do their jobs. That promise does not extend to January 6th or the FBI. New York Times reports that while after weeks of delay, the Trump transition team has finally signed a transition agreement. Quote, Trump's team has so far refused to sign an agreement with the Justice Department to allow the FBI to do security clearances for transition members. Trump has also turned down federal funding for his transition, which then allows him to raise unlimited private funds, including from foreign nationals, with zero requirement to disclose where they come from. Senator Elizabeth Warren slammed the announcement on social media, writing this, quote, this announcement fails to answer key questions about national security threats and FBI vetting of nominees and increases concerns about corruption. There appear to be serious gaps between the Trump transition's ethics agreements and the letter of the law. Joining our conversation, former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi is here. Michelle is back with us as well. Frank, your thoughts?
So look, this may be the first tangible action item that we can point to that says Trump intends to turn the FBI into his own personal police department. Why am I saying this? There's reporting by Hugo Lowell in The Guardian that says that the FBI will only do those background investigations for Trump after Trump takes over the FBI. So Trump's intention, according to people around him, is that, yeah, he'll do some background investigations with the FBI, but only once he takes control, once he names a deputy director and a director. Rumors, of course, have been out there that Kash Patel is up for at least deputy director. This creates a real national security dilemma, because what's going to happen, according to this Guardian article, is he's going to give blanket security clearances on day one to his nominees without benefit of the FBI background investigations having already been done. And then he'll task the FBI, and then, you know, the FBI will weigh in. But who's in charge of the FBI? Will Trump get a fulsome report? Will he dictate the outcome of the report? If you think that's far-fetched, we need only look back to the Justice Kavanaugh reinvestigation, where Trump literally dictated who they could interview, what they could focus on, and what they could do with the myriad allegations that were phoned in to the tip line. So we're beginning to see the plan here. He'll give senators on the Judiciary Committee an out by saying, oh, yeah, no, calm down. I'll give you an FBI investigation. Of course, it will be my FBI and my background investigation that I'll hand you. Hopefully, Republican members of the Senate Judiciary will balk at that. And, by the way, I would assert, as I did in an MSNBC Daily column last week, that President Biden has the authority right now to step in and say, I see a national security issue. I have the authority to order the FBI to do background investigations on nominees right now.
I mean, Frank, I'm thinking of Tulsi Gabbard as you're speaking, as being the kind of person that Trump may not want his last pick to head the FBI, Christopher Wray, to vet in an FBI background check. But I am at a loss beyond what is the incentive, just to go deep into the mind of Trump. Why does he want people who haven't been vetted, again, to not be counterintelligence threats to the United States of America?
There's a couple of ways that I'm looking at this. First, many of these people can't get another job. They literally, their backgrounds preclude them from meaningful employment. So what does that mean? It means they must be blindly loyal to him. Their power, their authority, their influence comes only through him. Secondly, he's got to be the smartest guy in the room, right? Now, that's probably never the case, but it has to be his perception that he's the smartest guy in the room. So let me surround myself with people who have the ethics and morality that I have, which is basically zero, and now we'll all be the same. No one can criticize me from an ethical or intelligence-related background.
Michelle, what's fascinating to me is that politically this doesn't serve Trump to weaken the caliber of people that run the government, that he will be held accountable for its success or failure. And I wonder just how sort of pickled the feedback loop is, or just tell me your thinking on the why.
Well, if you had nothing to hide, why not acquiesce to a background check? They're there for a reason. They've been in place since the Eisenhower administration. Part of it is a Cold War relic to make sure that people didn't have foreign ties, but also to look at financial problems that might lead people to be vulnerable to being blackmailed or something like that, to look into background so you actually know who's actually coming into office. I think that they're going to get some pushback on this, though. There's a bipartisan coalition of senators from the upper Midwest, Amy Klobuchar, Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, Mike Rounds from South Dakota, who are saying, wait a minute, we really think that we need to have these FBI background checks.
Still ahead for us, Donald Trump ran for president and won, based at least in part on voters' frustrations about how much stuff costs. But today, Americans face the very real possibility that stuff will cost more when Trump is inaugurated. That story's next.
From today and from the day I take the oath of office, we will rapidly drive prices down and make America affordable again. We're going to make it affordable again.
When he said that, people believed him. He hasn't been sworn in yet, and he may already be breaking that promise. Donald Trump announced that one of his first acts as president will be imposing a 25% tariff on all goods that come into the United States from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% tariff on all goods coming from China. The countries are America's three largest trading partners. Donald Trump says the tariffs are a retaliation against what he calls the flood of fentanyl and migrants coming into the U.S. The people who will be most harmed are not the migrants or any criminals. It's every American family who will face soaring prices as a result of the tariffs. One analysis found that prices could go up by as much as $3,900 per household each year, with some companies already preparing price hikes in anticipation of Trump returning to the White House and imposing his tariffs. Joining us at the table, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. Explain, just give me a basic on why this is his reflexive sort of first strike at the economy.
You know, it's a tool he has, I think, and he thinks it works. And he really does think, or at least he says, that the other country pays these tariffs when we know that's just not true. I mean, the importer pays the tariff. So, for example, for our viewers, if we're importing a bunch of tomatoes, which we do every day, those tomatoes, when they come to the port, there will be a tax, a 25% tax. This is what he'd like to do. And that tax is paid for by the importer, who then passes the cost along to wholesalers and consumers. So that's why we think this would raise prices for consumers. He has been very steadfast and consistent that he thinks that tariffs are the answer, even when historians and economists are telling him no, tariffs cause trade wars, which can cause depressions. He thinks this is the beginning, how he can reorder the world economy in favor of the United States.
Will it work?
I mean, he did it he's done this on China before, and it really hurt American farmers, and taxpayers had to pay billions of dollars to bail out farmers. Because what happens is when one country puts tariffs on another country, that country then turns around and puts tariffs back.
Retaliates.
It retaliates, right? And so all of a sudden, the United States sells a lot of stuff. Soybeans. I'm thinking soybeans. I'm thinking all kinds of, electronics that we sell, and computer and construction equipment and things the United States sells abroad that then will become more expensive there. And then you start to see the wheels of global trade start to shift, supply chains start to snag. There are costs that have to be shared and passed along. And that's why so many people find trade war so dangerous.
I mean, there's reporting that inflation is starting to come down, that the Thanksgiving dinner is coming down for the first time since Trump left office. What, sometimes with Trump, we get caught up in the shiny ball of what he's doing. What could he be actually doing? I mean, is it crisis creation so that he can come in and solve it?
What I think is interesting is this drama about raising prices and potentially reversing progress on inflation makes the Federal Reserve's job harder. The Federal Reserve then may be slower to lower interest rates, which Trump would probably hate, but also it hurts families and businesses as well. So there are a lot of different levers at the same time. He has been consistent that he's going to do this. There are a lot of companies who have been renting warehouse space around these port facilities because they're already stockpiling goods. Now, a big company can do that because they've got a lot of money that they can put into resources. But if you're a small company or a medium-sized manufacturer in this country, you might not have $1 million to be buying stuff up ahead of tariffs so that you can be on top of the game. And also, maybe this is just a negotiating ploy, right? Fine. So if this is the beginning of the negotiation, it still is uncertainty for these businesses that are trying to import stuff for the very important spring selling season if they are importers. So there's just a lot of uncertainty surrounding it.
We're going to ask you to stick around. I want to bring Michael Steele and Claire McCaskill in on the other side of a very short break. Don't go anywhere.
We're going to be a tariff nation. It's not going to be a cost to you. It's going to be a cost to another country. I heard Kamala the other day, Comrade Kamala. She said, oh, if you do that, he's raising your taxes. No, no, no. I'm not raising your taxes.
Michael Steele, let me read you this analysis from MSNBC. Quote, keep an eye on the corruption angle. When tariffs are imposed, administrations often create loopholes and exceptions, opening the door to lobbyists eager to deal. Don't be surprised if the Trump White House starts making assessments about companies and industries that play ball in ways the incoming president likes. Buckle up. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, remember, this is the man who told, the oil and gas industry, look, fellas, if you give me $1 billion, I'll give you whatever you want, right? So the next step from that is we impose these tariffs, which, okay, this is not going to affect, the people of America because Canada, Mexico, and China are going to pay those tariffs. But then the ancillary business that's created around the respective industries that are hit with the tariffs, whether it's, the growing industry, the food processing industry, products, goods and services, whatever it is. And so absolutely, this is all a grift.
When Democrats sort of, make a new argument to the country ahead of the midterms and the next presidential, how do you bake in the flagrant nature of the grift, that this is to enrich Trump and his friends, and the fact that, polling on tariffs suggests that 70% of Americans understand that tariffs on imports will make things more expensive? How do you square that 70% of all voters knew that tariffs would make things more expensive, but rejected Democrats because things were too expensive?
Doesn't make sense to me. And the weird thing about this is, as your guest pointed out, where this will have the most impact is small businesses, small manufacturing. And by the way, those places dot red America. They don't, the bigger companies are in urban America. The larger companies that can buy the warehouses and stockpile the steel, and farmers. I mean, that's red America. Farmers are red America. The last time, as she mentioned, they had to write a check for $28 billion to go talk about socialism. Talk about the central government buying people off through socialism. They wrote them a $28 billion check to make up for the losses they had because of the retaliatory tariffs on corn and soybeans. In Missouri, 50%. Billions and tens upon billions of dollars is exported to Canada and Mexico and then China to a lesser extent. The farmers in Missouri are going to take it in the shorts. And will he write them another check? Will all these guys, will Elon Musk be down with that because he's going to cut government spending so much? And by the way, can I just say a sad goodbye to guacamole? I love my freaking guacamole. I mean, some days I would like to take a bath in guacamole.
My son loves to play, like, you're on a desert island, you can have one food. My food is always chips and guac. Like, that's what I would live on till the end of time. And so I guess, what is it?
And avocados are going to go to $10 a piece. The only people that will be able to afford guacamole are Elon Musk and all of his children that are named after a mathematic formula. They will have their avocado toast. But people in Middle America, they are out of luck when it comes to guacamole or avocados. It's over. I'm just telling you, it's going to be a bloodbath at the place where you get your guacamole. You're going to your jaw's going to drop and you're going to go, okay, well, just remember, Donald Trump made guacamole unaffordable.
Michael. I really I feel like moved to activism over this guacamole.
Look, Nicole, if that's what it takes to get people off their damn behind, then okay, let's get in the guac caucus and figure out, how we help each other here.
This has been Primetime Weekend. I'm Nicole Wallace. Please tune into Deadline White House and all of our primetime shows weekdays on MSNBC.